Hello, everybody, and welcome to the penultimate Double Wave Yellows podcast of the season. It is the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix from the new Jeddah Corniche circuit, and my oh my, have we got a lot to talk about today. Good evening, as always, to my two compatriots on this, Hodders and Tyson. Hi, guys, how are we doing?
Hey, doing good.
Excellent
Yeah,
stuff.
not bad.
Yeah, so we've got an awful lot to talk about in terms of the F1 race, but back for the penultimate time, we have an F2 catch up. Tyson, over to you.
Right. Yeah, and it's been a long time since the last race. That one took place in Sochi all the way back in September. So, quick recap of how things stand. Oscar Piastri came into the weekend on 178 points, ahead of his main championship rival and now confirmed 2022 Alfa Romeo driver Guan Yu Zhou, who had 142 points. Robert Schwartzman's close behind them in 135 points, and Dan Ticktum and Theo Porcher in fourth and fifth with 129 and 120 points, respectively. And we get to the qualifying. Oscar Piastri just picks up right where he left off, continuing his incredible form in this second half of the season. Beat out his teammate Robert Schwartzman and Theo Porcher to take his fourth pole position in a row, which also increased his championship lead by 4 points. Joe was only able to qualify sixth, which left him with a lot of work to do if he wanted to close the gap. And Liam Lawson qualified 10th, which would start him on reverse grid pole ahead of Marcus Armstrong for the first sprint race. And the Saturday morning, Formula 2 gave us the indicator that this was going to be a fun racetrack. We had a bunch of early stoppages for collisions, as you'd expect on a street circuit of this nature, but some real exciting stuff once the race got going. Fast corners, multiple cars going in together, and a lot of daring overtaking maneuvers. But the big winner of race one was Marcus Armstrong. He passed Liam Lawson to take the lead at the start and never looked back, taking his first Formula 2 victory. They ended the race in first and second, with Lawson followed by his teammates Yuri Vips in third. Felipe Drogovic finished fourth ahead of Jahan Ruvela, who had a really good race, starting 11th and making his way all the way up to fifth by the end. And it was interesting because Piastri seemed to be having a much more cautious defensive race than we're accustomed to seeing, not making many attacking moves and even letting Dan Tickton through on the last lap, which put him outside the points. But that did allow him to start start on the front row for the second sprint race. So tactically, not a bad move on his part. But unfortunately, Guan Yu had a race he'd much rather forget, spinning out after attempting a move on Christian Lundgaard and suffering damage to his front wing. He finished 17th, which was where he would start for the second race as well. Marcus Armstrong, he was looking to build on his victory from earlier, but he was taken out early after a multi-car lap one collision, just unlucky to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the rest of the race wasn't without incidents as it ended under the safety car after Liam Lawson lost his rear at turn 13 and spun into the barriers with 2 laps to go. But at the other end, Oscar Piastri edged nearer to the title with his fourth victory of the season. Ben Viscal recovered from a slow start to take second, while Piastri's teammate Robert Schwartzman moved up to second in the championship standings ahead of Guan Yu Zhou after taking his sixth top three finish this year. And after starting last, Joe recovered well, but he was only able to add 1 point to his championship total, finishing in 8th place. Jahan Deruvela had a very unlucky weekend. He started on reverse pole after being handed a penalty in the first race, dominated the majority of it, but ended up outside the points at the checkered flag. He was handed a 5-second time penalty for the second race in a row for leaving the track and gaining an advantage while defending from Piastri. And then the late safety car just finished off any chance of him scoring points. Dan Tickton finished fourth, but for me, a real impressive showing from Formula 3 driver Jack Doohan, who rounded out the top five in only his second race in Formula 2, which was a really good effort by him. And then we came to the feature race, which was very incident filled. So Liam Lawson's crash in race two meant the barrier needed to be repaired, which postponed the start of the race for about a half an hour. And unfortunately, things never really got underway. A nasty collision between Theo Porcher and Enzo Fittipaldi that brought out the red flag almost instantly. Porcher stalled on the grid. Fittipaldi ran straight into the back of his stationary car, just a horrible accident. It led to a lengthy stoppage, and honestly, very concerning watching the live feed as there was no replays being shown, updates being given. The FIA did announce that both were conscious and that Pocher had been taken to hospital via ambulance while Fittipaldi was flown there by helicopter. And we've had good news in the days since that things were not as bad as they appeared. Pocher said he's feeling fine, just not sure he'll be on the grid for the season finale in Abu Dhabi. And meanwhile, Fittipaldi was fortunate to skate with only a fractured heel, and we send our best wishes and hope for a speedy recovery to the pair of them. The race did eventually resume, but in a very much shorter session. The plan was for a 20-minute race plus one lap, one mandatory pit stops, half points being awarded, but only 4 laps were completed before another collision, this time between Guilherme Samayev and Ollie Caldwell, brought out a safety car. They both climbed out unharmed, but a red flag followed, and it was quickly confirmed from there the race would not be restarting. That meant that Piastri picked up his 5th win of the season ahead of teammate Schwartzman, while Ralph Boschung finished 3rd for his first podium in Formula 2. Guan Yu Zhou and Felipe Drogovic completed the top 5, which left the standings collecting half points, Piastri increasing his championship lead to 213.5 points, ahead of Schwartzman, who moved up to 2nd on 162. Guan Yu Zhou left on 149. Dan Ticktum is 4th on 139.5 points, and Theo Pocher 5th on 124. The double podium meant that Prema have officially won the team's title with 375.5 points, ahead of Carlin on 235.5 and Univirtuosi in 3rd on 221. High-Tech are 4th with 209, and ART currently 5th with 174. So that means going into the final race, Piastri has a 51.5 point lead going into Abu Dhabi. And with 65 points on offer, his main rival of the season falling into 3rd and his teammate now right behind him in 2nd, it feels like it is very much his championship to lose at this point. But we will wait and see.
Thank you very much, Tyson. And I think the key bit from that one obviously is that both drivers involved in the feature race are okay. But we're getting
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean we watched the footage back just to understand what happened sort of prior to coming on air, and it doesn't look any better than watching it back. But I think, and again, that's a testament to the FIA and Motorsport in that they always continue to increase safety wherever they can.
Yep.
Good stuff. Right, time to move on to the main headline, the Formula One Grand Prix. And the main headlines: Lewis Hamilton wins from Verstappen after Lewis had a late collision with the Dutchman. Bottas beats Ocon in a final lap drag race down the start-finish straight to claim 3rd. It means that Max and Lewis, going into the final round, are tied on points at the top of the championship. 2 red flags causing absolute mayhem at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. So on to our driver focus. And some interesting choices that we got at the last race, and some good stuff to report back on. So I'm going to go first this time around, and my first choice out was Valtteri Bottas. Qualified and started on the front row and qualified in P2. Dropped to 3rd behind Max once the safety car was deployed on lap 10 for Mick Schumacher's incident. Obviously, then was the red flag. Bottas drops even further down to 5th on the first safety car restart. But he then fought hard, fought past Ricciardo and then Ocon in the closing laps to secure a double podium finish for Mercedes. Tyson, really good race from Valtteri.
Yeah, Bottas had a really good race this weekend, and I think that's exactly what Mercedes needed. With the Constructors' Championship on the line, it could very well be that performance by Bottas compared with Perez's performance, it might have just gotten that championship.
Mm-hmm. And Hodders Bottas breaking young drivers' hearts once again, sort of doing a drag race down the start-finish straight. We saw that in Baku a few years ago, beating Lance Stroll to 2nd. But it was a great spectacle to see that drag race all the way to the end.
It really was, and I think it's all credit to Ocon as well, but we'll be covering later on. I think it's all credit to push it right down to that final straight as well. It's the sort of thing we'd like to see. I mean, it's not often you have, a tenth of a second difference between third and fourth in any race, let alone on the final lap.
Indeed so. Hobbs, we're going to come to you next, and you had a very good choice of or good selection of drivers to report back on. Your first one, Charles Leclerc.
Indeed, the Monegasque driver had a pretty decent qualifying. He finished fourth in terms of qualifying. The fourth time he's finished in that position this season in terms of qualifying, so consistency is there, and it's a bit of a lucky number for him. He had a relatively straightforward race, stayed in the sort of peloton most of the way through, and ended up with a P7. Not bad for Ferrari whatsoever.
No, some good consistent point scoring, which is obviously making real benefits for Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. Tyson, we did see Leclerc caught up in a little bit of an incident with Sergio Perez just after the first safety car restart, but I think it's fair to say with that one, no blame can be apportioned, really.
Nah, not really. He was just squeezed against the wall. Nowhere really he could go. Nowhere that Perez could go either. I think the key word for Leclerc this season is consistency. He's just consistently delivering.
Yep, absolutely, and it's what Ferrari wanted in terms of sort of improving upon last season, regularly scoring good, solid amounts of points, and both Leclerc and his teammate have done that this year. Tyson, on to you, and someone who really did have a poor weekend, Seb Vettel.
Yeah, not a great weekend for Vettel, and honestly, it's a frustrating qualifying session for all three of my drivers this week. Just the number of cars that were out on track late in the session of Q1 and the amount of backing up and stalling that was going on in the final few corners. Vettel, he just had to back out of laps when he reached traffic. And yeah, the race, he was going along nicely until Yuki Tsunoda made another silly move. It has to be said, it was never going to work. Did damage to Vettel's car, and then he had a run-in with Kimi Räikkönen a few laps later, just started losing bits and pieces of his car, which brought out the VSC, so all that could be cleared up. And unfortunately, Vettel ended up retiring on lap 44.
Not good for the Aston Martin driver. That one's for you, Adako. We love you. Hodders, just a very frustrating race for Vettel, and that basically it was turned into a bumper car, unfortunately.
Yes, I think it was rather rushing. It had been the case. I mean, I did feel for Vettel as well, considering he's had some really, really strong performances, and for Vettel to have qualifying like that, it was just a really torrid weekend for him as a whole. And it really wasn't helped by the fact it was all compounded by the two slight bumps that caused him to retire. Real shame for him, and it's not really his fault.
No, not his fault as well. Hopefully he can finish with a flourish in Abu Dhabi this weekend. So on to the second round of choices, and my one up first, and it's quite fortunate I got this one. Esteban Ocon qualified and started in ninth place. He jumped to seventh on lap one. He then rocketed up to fourth by not pitting under the safety car, and obviously got a free tyre change under the red flags. He smartly avoided the fallout from Max and Lewis on the first safety car restart. He ended up second, but through race control instructions, which we'll talk about later, he ended up leading the restart for the first couple of 100 metres. Did run wide at turn one, and smartly, to avoid any sort of penalty, let Max through. Dropped down to third, but stayed there throughout until, as we mentioned, the last few 100 metres of lap 50. Hodders, really good, solid performance again from Esteban Ocon.
Again, it's solid, consistent. If you can just get a bit more consistency, who knows where it could be in future seasons. I mean, the promise for Alpine for him is very much there. He stayed up there. He stayed there to push Bottas from the second restart all the way up to those final couple of hundred meters on the final straight. That is good, mature driving, and it's commendable.
Absolutely. And Tyson, we've heard this week, Esteban's been saying, Alpine are going to be a force to be reckoned with next season. What are your thoughts?
It's something I would like to see, because I've always respected Alonso as a driver, and Ocon has been the real dark horse for me this season. He's just put in so many good performances. I'm looking forward to seeing what Alpine can do next year.
Absolutely. And sticking with Alpine, we're going to go to Hodders. You were covering Ocon's teammate, Fernando Alonso.
I was. I mean, it wasn't as spectacular as some recent races, but a respectable middling performance nonetheless. He ended up in P13, falling out in Q2, although it was only around 3/10 slower than the top 10 when it came to falling out of Q2, not making it to Q3. A bit of a quiet race compared to recent ones. He never really got started, even with the restarts amongst pits and others, so he finished as he began in 13th place. Not a spectacular weekend, but nothing terrible either. Respectable.
Yeah, it's a fair term that, but Tyson Fernando will wonder what could have been in terms of a potential points finish, or potentially sticking it in the barriers with the spin during the race.
Yeah, it was a quiet weekend, as Hodders said. Alonso, with all the other action happening, just seemed to be invisible this weekend. It's not really what we see from him.
No, it's just an off weekend, but hopefully we don't see any more of that. Tyson, we've spoken about Vettel, him not having a great weekend. You unfortunately also drew his teammate Stroll, who didn't do well either.
No, it just wasn't a good weekend for Aston at all. Stroll had the same issues in qualifying as his teammate, and yeah, just not a lot to say about Stroll's race either. He made contact with Russell early in the race and had to settle for 11th. I suppose in the positive, he avoided all the major incidents that happened, but yeah, just disappointing weekend for us all round.
Yeah, not great at all. And moving on to the final selection of drivers, and I ended up with Nicholas Latifi, who qualified and started in 16th. He was just 2/10 short of making it into qualifying too. Latifi had a poor start, dropped down to 19th. He then pitted under the safety car, dropping him all the way to last place. He avoided all the mayhem once the race got going, from the first safety car to jump all the way to 15th, and just work his way up to 12th, but he was a long way off the top 10. Tyson, just, I guess, a standard race for Latifi. He was just there or thereabouts at the back, really. Not much more he could do.
Yeah, he did what he could. He avoided all the major incidents. I don't really think much more could have been asked for him this weekend.
No. And Hollow's obviously going into the final race of the weekend. I guess Latifi would like to sort of beat his teammate at the sort of the last chance with the equal machinery this weekend.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, they've been back, and I think he's been bettered quite a lot, not all the time, but quite a lot by George and the Williams machine. And I think a bit of a last hurrah would be quite nice while they're still in the same team.
Absolutely. And speaking of last hurrahs, coming to a driver who is approaching potentially the last hurrah of his Formula One career. Hollers, talk to us about Antonio Giovinazzi.
And what a weekend to have a pick for him as well. He had a brilliant weekend. He qualified in Q10. He only just scraped through into Q3 as well. However, nevertheless, you can't complain when you get into Q3 by just 52 thousandths over Daniel Ricciardo. His fourth Q3 appearance of the year. And he pretty much stayed in the top 10 throughout the race, as high as 7th at one point. I mean, and this time, unlike others where he sort of fitted away or made a mistake, he stayed up there, finished P9, and in so doing, trebled his points tally for the season. A very, very good weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to see that from Antonio. Tyson, we've been slightly impressed with Giovinazzi's performances over sort of the last sort of 5-6 races, but unfortunately he's just left it. It's too little, too late, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a shame because he really has been switched on the last few races, but hopefully he's able to take this momentum he's been building, take it to Formula E, and have a good season over there.
Absolutely, we hope so. And finally, Tyson, you really did get unlucky with the picks this time round. Mick Schumacher.
Well, I got much better picks last time out, so this balances things out. Schumacher, same issues as the Astons in qualifying. He qualified 19th, and pretty much expected for the Haas at this point, but the race was no better for him. Lap 10, he spun and hit what was becoming the infamous wall of drift. So at turn 22, triggered the safety car that eventually became a red flag. And Haas, I think they just want the season over at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been more than enough machine coming off the bleep machine at Haas for Gunter Steiner, but yeah, I think Haas especially will be saying roll on 2022. Okay, so we've done the driver focus for this weekend, but before we go into the winners and spinners, let's work on who we are going to be looking back on for Abu Dhabi. So the usual format, obviously, Lewis and Max are removed from selection. We're picking from the drivers at random. The only rule is we're not allowed to have any of the three drivers that we reported back on for the previous race. So I am going to go first. I'm going to shuffle it up on random.org and let's have a look and see what I get. Okay, that's not too bad. So first one out for me is Pierre Gasly.
Yep, he's good.
Mm-hmm. Charles Leclerc.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny Ricciardo.
Ooh, very nice.
Nice.
It's a good mix, that.
That's a good mix indeed. I'm happy with that. Hodders, let's see what you're going to get. Okay, that's not bad actually. So the first one would have been Leclerc,
no,
which you can't have.
You've got him, and I already had him.
Yep, well, that works quite nicely. Perez,
that'll do.
Tsunoda,
well, please have a good one, Yuki.
and George Russell.
Hey, that'll do.
That is a really good selection. Right, Tyson, let's hope it's going to be nice to you this time round.
Surely.
Let's have a look. Shuffle. Oh, that's not bad at all. Number one, Valtteri Bottas.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Second one, Nicholas Latifi.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Third one, Carlos Sainz.
This is a pretty good mix for a final weekend.
That's a really good mix. I think we'll
we love you lots.
That's a good selection, that. Cool. Okay. So on winners and spinners time, we can obviously talk through who had a weekend to remember and who had a race they really would rather forget. We're going to go through the winners first. Tyson, I'll go to you first. Who was your winner of the weekend?
There was really no question about it for me this weekend. It had to be Esteban Ocon. He made it into qualifying 3. He was leading the race at one point after the restart, after passing both Lewis and Max. Then had a hell of a fight with Bottas for P3, only losing out by the narrowest of margins at the end. So that's my winner for the weekend.
Yeah, and I think a very valid case there. Of course, let us know what you think on YouTube and on Twitter. Don't forget, leave us a comment down below, or obviously leave a comment on our Twitter page at DWavedYellows. Hodders, who was your winner?
Well, it's nice to say something nice about him for the first time in a number of races. Who other but the grinning, shoey, drinking honey badger himself, Danny Ricciardo. His first points finish since the Grand Prix in Austin, where he also finished 5th, and it's good to see him back in form, particularly considering he only made it as far as Q2. It's the sort of position we would expect McLaren's to be at. I mean, he's had a real rut the last few races, whether it's been through retirements or finishing 12th, and it's good to see him back where he should be.
Absolutely, yeah. Danny Ricciardo did have a very good race. And for me, my win of the weekend was Antonio Giovinazzi. Superb qualifying to get into Q3 and a fine points finish on his penultimate race with Alfa Romeo. Just an excellent performance throughout the weekend and really, really pleased for him. Right. On to the spinner, and it is singular because we are all in agreement as to who it should be. Any guesses, everybody?
I don't know, Matt. You'll have to tell us.
We're not going to make any apology for this, but
for
all of us, Max Verstappen was the spinner of the weekend. For me personally, I feel the pressure of leading the championship has got to him. he basically blew what would have been one of the best qualifying laps you will ever see. Forget this season, forget this decade. He was absolutely on it in qualifying 3 until he just went a little bit too far into the final corner. Bang, hit the wall, and that was it. So resulted in him only starting in position 3. He would have been on pole by a huge margin had he not blown it. He then exceeded the track limits twice, both of which he was penalised for, and then the highly controversial brake test incident on Lewis Hamilton, which we will discuss in greater detail later on. Hodders, what have you got to add to that?
It's just, I mean, I'll admit I watched the qualifying live, and I could have been physically sick at that final qualifying lap. He just overrated it that much, and it was a stunning lap until what happened. I think that can be taken as read. And it's a real shame. And to go towards the taxis he was going down during the race, it's just not on. There is no need. If you want to win a championship, you win it fair and square. You do not brake test your rival.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just wholly unacceptable.
Yep, completely agree. And obviously, we're going to discuss in a little bit more detail shortly. Tyson, yeah, not really much more to add, I guess.
No, not really. The phenomenal lap up until the final corner, and then just the antics during the race. Yeah, just not on that kind of behaviour.
Yeah, not good. We have given an honourable mention, and again, we will expand on this in a little bit. We're going to get to the race director, Michael Massey, because for anyone in that sort of position, that is going to be one of the hardest races of his career that he would have had to have managed from a race control perspective. You know, he kept his cool whilst others were losing theirs, and he's obviously used all of his experience to bring the race to a safe conclusion, but also trying to make sure that the stewards weren't involved as much as needs be. But we will talk more in a bit. So moving on to the talking points, Max versus Lewis, round 21 of 22. A lot of questions to ask on this one. Hoddles, I'll come to you for this one. Has Max blown his chance of winning this title?
Well, I don't think he's completely blown it, but he's certainly put quite a few punches and a few holes in the chance of winning a title. I mean, he could have had it all. I mean, I think, this is an opinion, if that lap in qualifying had been perfect, I think he'd have had every chance of having an almost unassailable lead going into the final round. So I don't think he's completely blown it, but it's becoming less likely.
Mm-hmm. And Tyson, I will come to you first for the next question. Was Max lucky to get only a 10-second time penalty for the collision with Lewis?
Yeah, I think he was very lucky, because that brake check, that was a really dirty move when I watched it live, and I honestly thought there was going to be a lot more than that. So, yeah, I think just very lucky to only escape with a 10-second penalty for that.
Mm-hmm. And Hodders, we've discussed it quite a few times this year. You know, the stewards only look at the actual incident itself. They don't look at the effect it had, so to speak. We obviously discussed it in great detail when Max and Lewis collided at Silverstone. But the stewards would not have looked at the penalty and thought, right, okay, we need to demote him X number of places. Let's give him enough of a time penalty. So they've said that 10 seconds is the standard for that sort of behaviour. Again, do you think that's right?
I think 10 seconds, I mean, you can't really do motions in grid positions. I think at the time, based on the instant, not the impact, I think 10 seconds is proportional, though I think we discussed this before. I'm surprised that there wasn't a black and white flag waved as well as that for dangerous driving. I think a time penalty, I think the black and white flag needs to be utilised in situations like that as a clear warning.
Yeah, and the black and white flag is actually at the discretion of race control. It's nothing to do with the stewards on that one. Hodders, was Lewis lucky to survive that collision with Max? Because it was a fairly big old hit he took.
It was a big old hit at speed as well. I mean, he had a bit of damage to the front wing, which wasn't detrimental in the end. It could have been a lot worse, as we saw with other incidents in other formulas as well.
Yeah, and actually that's a good one to come on to it. Tyson, we saw what happened in the F2 feature race. We could have had a similar outcome with this Max and Lewis incident.
That's something nobody wanted to see. I think both of them were lucky to survive the collision because we've seen people be put out of a race for far less. Lewis could have lost his front wing, Max could have punctured his rear tyres, anything could have happened.
And of course, we could have had cars behind getting involved in that as well,
Yep.
which we definitely don't want to see. So, looking at the championship permutations, so we'll do the Drivers' Championship first, and it is plain and simple. Whoever scores the most points wins. If neither driver scores, Max will win the title by due to the fact that he has 9 wins to Lewis Hamilton's 8. So it's on count back. In terms of the Constructors' Championship, so let me just have a look. So Mercedes have got a 28-point lead. Now, the maximum points available for the team is 44. So, Mercedes, all they need to do is score 16 points, and that will do it. I think I'm fairly sure that Mercedes have got more wins, and this is where I'm starting to actually doubt myself.
They may well have done.
Yeah, let me just double check. So you can
This
tell
is
we
proof that we
record
did this live.
Yeah,
you can tell we did this live, and this is live and barely rehearsed.
Yeah, so rehearsed. We don't even have that bleep machine in.
We don't need it.
No, absolutely, because we do control things. Right. Okay. So we are relying on good old Wikipedia to help us with this one. So let's have a look. So Mercedes have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wins. Red Bull 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
So Mercedes will actually need to score 17 points because obviously if they end up tied on points, then Red Bull will obviously win it on countback. So 17, so it's going to mean they're going to need... Well, yeah, they're going to need some serious points out of this one, whatever happens. And speaking of championships, we may as well go through the championship standings. And as we've already mentioned, Max and Lewis are tied at the top of the table on 369.5 points. Valtteri Bottas on 218 points is now guaranteed third place. He cannot be caught by Sergio Perez, who is in fourth on 190 points. Charles Leclerc on 158. Norris dropping back a bit now on 154 points. Sainz on 149.5. Ricciardo on 115. Pierre Gasly has his century of points, and Fernando Alonso on 77. In the Constructors' Championship, it is oh great, now my notes have just gone wonky. Again, proof we're doing this completely live. Oh dear,
we don't cut unless we have to.
Yeah, true, absolutely. Yeah, there we go. Now it's working. So Mercedes on 587.5 points. Clear from Red Bull on 559.5 points, a 28-point gap. Ferrari on 307.5 points from McLaren on 269. So McLaren really are needing a miracle at this point to overtake Ferrari and secure third in the championship. Alpine are now guaranteed fifth place. They are they are not guaranteed fifth place. My maths has all gone to pot there. So Alpine on 149, AlphaTauri on 120. Very, very close there. Aston Martin on 77. Williams are on 23. Alfa Romeo on 13 points. They've slightly closed the gap to Williams, but it won't be anywhere near as much they need unless we get a really bonkers race in Abu Dhabi. And Haas, as always this season, on 0. Right, now let's talk through the race control decision because there was a lot for Michael Massey and his colleagues in FIA control to deal with. So first thing first was obviously we had Schumacher crash, which brought the safety car out on lap 10. And then to a lot of people's surprise, the race was suspended on lap 13. The reasons being that the tyre barrier at turn 22, where Schumacher had crashed, needed repair. Hodders, I think this one was. I think once we saw the actual damage to the tyre barrier, once they'd moved Schumacher's car away, it was fairly clear that tyre barrier was damaged. It needed repair. They had to stop the session.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there was questions why it took so long initially, but I suppose it's very difficult to see what a tyre barrier looks like when you've got a disabled car in front of it. Once that came off, it was inherently clear that the barrier wasn't safe, so it was an absolutely right call when it was made.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson, although a lot of people would argue, another car going off at the same place, it will never happen. Those sort of attitudes may have existed 30, 40 years ago. Not now, not in any way, shape, or form in motorsport. The risks are just far too high.
Yeah, and indeed, we've seen that kind of thing happen where people have gone off at the same point. I think the right decision was made, though, to red flag the race. Obviously, the damage to the barrier wasn't clear until the car had been moved. But yeah, stuff like that needs to be repaired as soon as possible, and the red flag was the right call.
Mm-hmm. And eventually, about 20, 25 minutes later, we got going again, a standing start. But almost immediately, we had a big collision. Perez being spun around by Leclerc, and those taking the avoiding action. Mazepin just crashed straight into the back of George Russell. That did result in a red flag, but we've looked back at the footage, and it's about 40 seconds from the incident occurring to actually the red flag being shown on the timing screens. And Hodders, we were quite surprised at that because the race, there was no safety car. It's gone straight from localized yellows to red. What if another incident happened?
Exactly. I mean, we saw that the medical car was on the scene very, very quickly, commendably so. You would think when an incident like that is seen, you would think that would be a safety car activation immediately. So the delay there was very unusual and hard to justify.
Yeah, and Tyson, we very, very rarely criticise race control, the FIA, the stewards, etc. But I think on this occasion, they should have made a decision much quicker. I think what we feel there should have happened is put the safety car out straight away. The cars are still around the other side of the circuit. And then if they think, no, we need to stop it completely, they can put the reds out and pull the cars into the pit lane before they get round.
Yeah, I agree. It was clearly obvious that was going to take a bit of cleaning up first, the spin with Perez, and then the crash with Mazepin straight after.
Yeah, not good. And then Michael Massey makes a deal. This was rather bizarre. I've got to say, in 25 years of watching Formula, I have never heard this sort of thing going on. But so just be clear as to what happened. So on the second start, effectively after the first safety car, Lewis Hamilton was leading into turn one. Max outbraked himself, ran wide at turn one, and then came back on across the curbs in front of Lewis, and Ocon obviously managed to get past. So in Michael Massey's view, it was clear that Max had exceeded the track limit. Now, normally under green flag or safety car conditions, the race director, not just Michael Massey, but his predecessor, the late Charlie Whiting, would say to the teams, look, you guys exceeded track limits. It's been unfair. Let the driver behind back through, please. Obviously, can't do this because A, it's under red flags, and B, they're in the pit lane. So Michael Massey's quite reasonably gone to Red Bulls and said, okay, I'm giving you the option here. You need to let both Ocon and Hamilton through, i.e. you need to drop back behind Hamilton. Okay, you've got the option here because his view was, if you're not going to do that, I'll just send the incident to the stewards for them to investigate because it was going to be a pretty clear-cut penalty on that one. Hodders, it was bizarre, but that was brilliant race management there.
I think it was bizarre, but I think it was also unprecedented. We've not had a situation like that before to have something like that and then a red flag. I think back to use legalese, I think it was proportionate. I think it was perfectly fair as well to do that, and it resolved everything.
Yeah.
It may not be to everyone's satisfaction, but it was good, quick, sound judgment. And civilly done as well.
Yeah, very civilly done. I mean, there was a bit of confusion because I think initially it was I think Michael Massey offered drop Max back to position 2, but I don't think he'd realised that in the confusion that actually Ocon had got past Hamilton, so that was all fine and dandy. Tyson, I think it's fair to say that had Red Bull said no, we're going to start from pole position, almost fairly certain that he was going to get a 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits.
Yeah, and I think you summed it up well. If they were still in live play, as it were, they would have the ability to right that wrong for the corner cutting. But the FIA radio, it's something new that we've got this season, and we do enjoy seeing it. But it was bizarre. That's the only word for it. To hear this negotiation going on live over the airwaves. Honestly, I was expecting Noel Edmonds to pop up at 1 minute with the banker's offer.
But one thing we should say at this point, and these people know who they are, we're not going to name them, but to accuse the FIA, the race stewards, Michael Massey, of effectively race fixing is disgusting. There is absolutely no place for it in any sport. Yeah, in no sport do you accuse the officials of cheating. We don't like seeing that sort of stuff on social media. If you have been posting that, don't. Okay, there's no place for it. Okay. Anyway, that's our rant over on that one. And then lastly, we had quite a lengthy virtual safety car, I think for about 3 or 4 laps, to clear all the debris. Now, I can understand why. They need to get obviously the debris off the track as quickly as possible. And obviously, again, race control have looked at the gaps between the cars on the track map. I think, there's enough time there. But usually we only see the VSC active for a full lap maximum. So, and usually if it's anything more, I usually see them go from VSC to full safety car. So, Tyson, again, this was a little bit odd.
Yeah, it was really strange to see the virtual safety car left out for so long to pick up all the debris. And part of me wonders, were they concerned if they brought the full safety car out, there would be yet another incident to happen? So it was a tricky call, no matter what.
It may also be Hodders that Burnt Mylander wanted to try out his new VR headset, but we don't know.
It's just sometimes you have to make a call and follow through with it, and that they did.
They did indeed. Right, so moving on to the next bit, and this is something that Lando Norris in particular has picked up upon in the rules for the red flags, and I don't think these have been changed actually since the race suspension bit has been brought in since 2005. Hoddles, I'll come to you first. Should teams be allowed to change the tyres or make repairs when the cars are under red flag conditions?
It's tough to make a call on this one. I mean, I personally, if it's going to be at length, I don't see anything wrong with it. I can see why some teams would think it could be an unfair advantage, or it might change the outcome of the race. Although, when it comes to free tyre changes and the like, I don't see a huge problem with it. That's just my opinion, though. But I can understand the frustrations.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyson, what's your views?
Yeah, likewise. You only really hear the teams complain about something like this when it doesn't go their way. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things. I can understand that they will argue, well, we want to make repairs and change stuff for safety, but at the same time, it does introduce an element of luck into things, which, again, if you're leaving someone out on track, banking on a red flag, that could lead to a bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, we heard Lewis complaining an awful lot about the fact that Max was able to change his tyres for free, but we didn't hear him complaining as much in Imola when he was getting his car repaired and the tyres changed during the red flag there. Moving on to more cheerful stuff. Obviously, another new circuit. Very, very fast street circuit, which is something very rare we see. Tyson, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I really like this one. It's It goes back to something I have been talking about recently, that the drivers take liberties now with the white lines. If there was a nice concrete wall there for them to run into, they wouldn't do it half as much. I agree it's a little unsafe not having all that runoff, but when you get to see them just driving really quickly, they are forced to keep it within the lines. And, well, for the most part, it's just really good to see.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. It was just seeing some of the onboards through, the sweeper section was just like, wow,
Breathtaking.
absolutely. And you just think if something were to, just one slight mistake here or something, falls off the back of the car, that's going to be pretty big. Hodders, what was your thoughts on the Jeddah Corniche circuit?
I mean, I will say credit to them for finishing it in time. I mean, we saw all those pictures, even a week, 2 weeks, a month before, and we thought, will it be finished? As it turns out, it was. So credit to those who were involved in the construction of the circuit. I will say it's got some great long, fast straights. I mean, I think it's one of the few tracks we'll ever get where there's 3 DRS zones. There's plenty of opportunities for overtaking, and those opportunities did arise. Even though I think there are some concerns around how narrow it is. I know at least one friend of mine who thought that if we're going to be there for 10 years, there is a potential risk with instances we've seen even this weekend that somebody could end up seriously hurt within the next few years. And I hope they don't. And I wouldn't be surprised if there might be some small amendments in the years to come, if only for the better.
Yeah, and that's something that we've read this week, and that the FIA are going to look to make changes to the circuit for next time round. But obviously, they will be smaller. And I think basically they will be to make the corners more open in terms of visibility. We look at the Mazepin crash, and that solely happened because he's come round a blind corner and he has not seen George Russell until it's too late. Yeah, there we go. So moving on to a few little bits for this weekend, and it's been very interesting to read Michael Massey's race director notes, which are issued to the team managers and the drivers before the start of the weekend, and he's made very clear reference to items in the International Sporting Code, which is basically the rules that govern the whole of motorsport across the world. References such as drivers getting involved and trying to influence the championship result. The stewards have the power to deduct points, to ban them from the following season, or even disqualify them from the championship. So that is Michael Massey not necessarily telling the drivers, but making it very clear the rules are there and they will use them if drivers choose to get unnecessarily involved. Hodders, I think this is a very clear, sensible message here.
It absolutely is. When it's the closest series that we've had since 1974, which incidentally, factoid there, is the last time there was a tied series going into the final race, although under current scoring it wouldn't be the case. I think it's absolutely right that the law is laid down firmly. This is a title deciding race. It comes down to this. Don't muck about. That's pretty much what Michael Massey is saying, and quite rightly so, to all drivers.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Tyson. This is not just aimed at Max and Lewis. This is not just aimed at Red Bull and Mercedes. You obviously have the likes of Perez and Bottas in there. You have AlphaTauri. You have other Mercedes power drivers. It's a message to everyone: don't get involved.
Yeah, and I think it's a message that needed to be sent out because there are a lot of factors going into this weekend. Personally, for me, it's the most exciting season I can remember in a long time. The races on track have been good. The drama off the track has been interesting to follow, and hopefully it's decided on the track. The better driver wins, because the last thing we want is for this to go to the stewards and to the courts and just have a mess of it at the very end.
Yeah, we don't want the championship to be remembered for that. And great news for British viewers. It's been agreed this week that Channel 4 will broadcast the final race in Abu Dhabi free to air. They will show the Sky Sports coverage, essentially, so the Sky Sports commentary on Channel 4. Tyson, this is fantastic. We were reading a little bit earlier that I think 2.7 million people were watching on Sky Sports for Saturday. We could have a lot more tuning in on Sunday afternoon.
I would hope so, because Formula One obviously has been in the news a lot lately with everything that's happening, and I do think it should be on free-to-air. Get as many eyeballs on this as possible. As I said, it is the closest championship in a long time, and yeah, I think people are going to want to watch this.
Absolutely, and we must give full credit to B Sky B and Sky Sports for allowing this to happen. I think that it's received unanimous praise from all of the viewers, from Stefano Domenicali, who is the head of Formula One. It's going to be really, really good. One thing I'd like to see, and I don't know how feasible this would be, is if it's possible, let's see the championship trophies presented on the podium at Abu Dhabi. We've never seen it happen, and let's see that happen. Let's see that happen in front of the cameras. Let the fans in Abu Dhabi who've paid to get out there to see this, because this is, as I say, this is probably one of the best championships ever across. This is the 72nd championship season. So yeah. Let's hope we see that. So, final thoughts. Obviously, we've made clear our thoughts on the title battle. I am really looking forward to Sunday afternoon's race. Obviously, we hope you all are too at home and on Twitter. Obviously, let us know what you think. But also, we say farewell to some of our Formula One friends. As you mentioned, Valtteri Bottas is leaving Mercedes. He will be going to Alfa Romeo, and he is being replaced by George Russell. It's his final race at Williams. And we also say goodbye to Giovinazzi and Arrivederci. Thank you very much. Arrivederci to Antonio Giovinazzi and to Kimi Räikkönen, who Alfa Romeo have revealed this week that on the back of Kimi's car it said, "Don't worry, Kimi will leave you alone now," which is a brilliant touch. It's absolutely brilliant. Just very briefly, Hodders, Kimi has provided much entertainment for Formula One over the last 20 years, but he has also been a world champion. He has lots of wins to his name, quite a few pole positions. He will rightly go down as one of the best drivers of the sport.
You can't deny that when you're in a sport for 20 years at top level and never really taking the foot off the accelerator, pardon the pun. I mean, even this season, he's given us some moments. Humour aside, he is one of those racing, particularly in Finnish racing in Formula One. He goes down as a legend in that right as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson, Antonio Giovinazzi, I don't think it's fair to call him inconsistent. He's had a bit of a mixed career, but he has fought hard this season to stay in, but alas, for little success.
Yeah, I think he's done what he can, but unfortunately, the revolving door that is Formula One, he just found that he's out of a spot now, but he will be moving on to Formula E, and hopefully he finds some success over there.
And no doubt we will report on his progress over there. So next week we'll see the final podcast of the season when we review the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Later in December, we are going to do a feature-length review of the season. We're obviously going to cover all of Formula 1, but we're going to do a little bit on Formula 2, Formula 3, and of course the W Series. So stay tuned for that. We'll bring you news as and when we are going to get that to happen. So time to wrap it all up. My thanks as always to Tyson and to Hodders for their contributions. Guys, we have got one hell of a race to look forward to this weekend.
You can say that again.
Guys, we have got a hell of a season. Yeah, I knew that was happening.
No, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a cracker. I can't wait for it. Thanks very much. And lastly, as always, my thanks to you for watching and for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment on YouTube. Don't forget to give us a follow on Twitter at DWavedYellows. say hello. We're all perfectly reasonable humans. Normally at this point, I would say be good. If you can't be good, be safe. I think it's also important bearing what's been on social media over the last few days in terms of F1. Be good, be safe, and be nice to each other. From all of us here, goodbye.